The room's filling up, but I'll just get started. So hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're calling from. Welcome to the Oxford Online Experience webinar, where we'll be focusing on our leadership courses and our sustainability online courses as we go through. So thank you for joining. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. We have the Q&A box for any questions that you might have that will come up as we go through. Please use that to ask those questions. We've got a team in the background here who may be able to answer that for you live, or we may answer it directly on the webinar, but do ask those as they come up. The main room that we're in now is recorded. We're recording this bit, but we will also be running a number of breakout rooms for the other courses that we're looking to cover today in terms of the MBA Fundamentals program and the Sustainability Data Reporting program. But more on that in a moment. We'll have an option to join those breakout rooms as they appear. In terms of the panelists that we have today, we're very lucky to be joined by a number of our top faculty and tutors. We've got Jason Hamilton covering emerging leaders. He's the program director of that course. For MBA Fundamentals, we have Tian Smith, who's one of our program tutors. We have Cyrus Suntuk covering our sustainability reporting and data management course. And we have on the alumni, Rob Roberts has joined us today to discuss his experience. He's done a number of courses with Robert Dickinson, both sustainability, but also AI. I mean, Robert, would you like to just jump in on that and introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I'm Robert Dickinson. I work for a small charity, Social Care in Action, and I'm the interim head of finance. And my career goal, if you like, is to do a number of interim roles. And I have found more recently, particularly in the charity sector, sustainability is becoming more important, particularly the social and governance side of things. And I did the AI course as well, which has really helped me, particularly with the networking side of things as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robert. So we'll come on to that as we go through, because there's a lot of experience that we'd like to hear as we go through the different areas. But in terms of an overall agenda, so we'll be looking at why choose Oxford, why us. We'll be looking a little bit about the experience you can expect with these online courses. We'll have a little look at the demo, the campus demo, the campus platform, which is our online learning experience portal. A little bit of the benefits around joining these courses, what you'll gain at the end of it. And a sort of a wider conversation around the alumni community that you'll have an option to join as well, assuming you were able to pass the course. When we get into the breakout rooms for the individual programs, we'll be doing a deep dive into each course in terms of why join that course, who's it for, typically, what's a good target participant, what's the kind of content breakdown around modules in terms of assignments, assessments, the kind of faculty and guest speakers you can expect on these courses and the value that they'll bring, as well as some practical conversations around how to apply and of course time for Q&A to get into the questions that you'll have for those courses. So just jumping into why us, why Oxford. As you'll know, we're fairly well heard of. We're the number one university in the world and have been for some time. In terms of Saïd Business School itself, we're the number one in the UK, according to the rankings last year. So a strong business school within a strong university. We have 50 plus, I believe it's 67,000 alumni currently in that group. It's probably one of the biggest growing areas within our executive education department across over 200 countries and territories. And the pass rate is obviously very high as well. We're big on support and making it very accessible courses. So we're looking at 92% pass rate at the moment. So we're very pleased with that. We're going to run a quick poll now. We'd like to hear from you. So we'd be keen to hear from you in terms of which course today are you particularly interested in. So there'll be a poll appearing on the screen shortly. We'd just like you to select one of either MBA Fundamentals, the Emerging Leaders Program, or the Sustainability and Data Reporting Program. So that should come, that wouldn't come up. There it is. Sorry, come up slightly delayed for effect. There we go. So please pick one and let us know where your interest is right now. Should hopefully see a pop-up that's appeared on the screen. So if there is data coming in, I can't see it. Can you guys see any results popping up?
Not
Oh,
on. Oh, there we go.
there we go. So emerging leaders seems to have won it just slightly. MBA fundamentals also very popular, and sustainability reporting is done. So it's a good split there. Actually, there isn't a strong favourite, which is great. And as I say, we'll dive into we'll have an opportunity to dive into each one shortly. So thank you for sharing that. That's a good split of interest. We've got a slide now on the Oxford Online experience, and Robert, would you like to sort of jump in here and share your own experience on the courses that you've been through?
Yes, I found the platform Canvas and Pronto very helpful. Um, the learning is very easy to go through. There are some excellent references, and it allows you really to participate as well in some of the quizzes that take place. And so the learning very much is consolidated. It's a 6 week course, so it is important to complete each module before you go on to the next. So it's quite pressurized, particularly if you've got other commitments. But once you get to the end, you feel very happy that you've achieved some really good stuff in terms of ESG data reporting, in my example, which you can pass on to your employer.
Thank you very much, Robert. And then actually just to continue on from that, we have a little video here just to show you what the sort of Canvas platform looks like in this case for the data reporting ESG program. So I'll run this video as we go. So this is actually the actual lesson one, unit one section which you've seen yourself, Robert. And do you remember this? I mean, how did you?
I do, yes. Um, So yeah, you can see all these little quizzes. You can click on the interaction. I think the question is, can you copy that onto into another document so you can refer to it at a later stage? Because this is a lot of useful information, and several weeks after the course finishes, you don't get access to this. So it's just a question, really, how do you capture all this knowledge? Very interactive. And you can also see when you push that submit button, the answers from all the other members of the cohort. So you can see whether your thinking is very close to theirs or whether you're very different. So it's very actually user friendly. And you can see on the left-hand side there, it gives you an indication of where you are with the course. So, um, each module took me about 10 hours. Over 6 weeks, that's, between 60 and 70 hours of work. Um, and I also had a day job as well. So I tended to work mainly at the weekends to complete that. You've got yeah, so when you pick the right answer, it sort of encourages you're correct. If you don't, it will tell you why the answer you chose is not correct, which is really great. So it's the ultimate in um, in choosing the right answer. But you can still go on if you don't necessarily have to get the right answer before you can move forward. Yeah, overall, a very good platform to work on.
No, thanks, Robert. And how did you find sort of the live content? So when we do a synchronous session every week, did you find you were able to make those, or did you find that you were able to access the recordings if you weren't able to make those live sessions? I mean, how did that sort of element feel, the synchronous part?
Yeah, so each week there are live tutorials. I could access the recording. I think I missed one of them, but was able to catch up with that. And the live recordings are an opportunity to ask questions of tutors. So that if there's any particular issues that you're not sure about, you can ask them. And there's also a debate as well with all the participants. No question is a silly question. It's very important to keep engaged throughout the program.
Great. Thanks very much, Robert. So we'll move it on from there and just talk a little bit about the benefits of the programs that we run here. So assuming that you're able to pass and the data suggests that you will, you'll be given the option to join our alumni community, which we've been sort of touching on previously, as well as you'll be given a certificate to show that you've passed the course, a CPD certified certificate with your name, the course, the Oxford logo. So these are fairly sought after, I found in my time here. I spoke to somebody once who had one of these printed off on the wall behind him, framed on the wall behind him, which is quite interesting. But most people just put them on LinkedIn. But no, the people are generally quite fond of these. So this is what you'll get when you finish and you pass the course. Just a quick word then on the alumni specifically. So as I say, you'll be given the option to join this essentially a global cohort. It's 67,000 now and strong across those 200 countries. And it's essentially thought leadership events that you'll be invited to, conversations, of course, but also very strong networking opportunities as well. The networking on the course is very strong because you'll be mixing with a broad range of individuals, either across ELP, MFU, and the SRM program, that are like-minded individuals who have similar sort of challenges that they're trying to overcome or training needs that they're trying to fulfill. A little bit of what got you here won't get you there is a bit of the motto we run with here. So there's opportunities to network on the course, but it really expands and grows once you've finished and you get into this wider community of individuals. So that's worth noting as well. So we're at the stage now where we'd like you to choose a breakout room. So there'll be some options appearing on the screen. If you'd like to cover the emerging leaders program, please do just stay here in the main room. We're going to cover that off on this slide deck. But if you'd like to do a deep dive into the MBA fundamentals program or the data reporting program, sustainability data reporting program, those options will now appear on the screen for you to join those breakout rooms. So do choose the breakout room that you would like to engage in further. So if you click on the More button with the three dots, you'll see there are options there for MBA fundamentals and sustainability reporting. So once you've done that, you can click join. I can see 12 of you, 13, 14, 15 have now joined MBA fundamentals. Sustainability reporting has 10 plus in it so far, so do join that. I will be joining the MBA fundamentals program with my co-tutor Tian. But staying on this room will be Jason and other members to support this room. So we'll see you back in the main room at the end. But for those of you leaving us at this point, see you again shortly.
So it's over to me now. Let's check if everybody can hear me. You can just drop comment into the chat. Perfect. I don't have the presentation, but I'm just going to talk through what enterprise leadership, enterprise leadership, what emerging leadership really is. So I think firstly, and I want to make this interactive. So if there's any questions or comments, please feel free to just put your questions in the chat, and then we can come to that. But there are a few points I want I want to just touch on. I think firstly, what let me start kind of with a question, which often is what comes up is what this program is really trying to do. And I think what's important is the emerging leader program is really designed around this transition that I think many successful leaders find much more difficult than they initially expect. So you may have built a career um, being very good at what you do. You understand your function. You understand how to deliver results. You solve problems, and often you are the person people turn to for answers. But then, as your role expands, obviously the expectation starts to change. So you're no longer only being asked to manage your own area, but you're expected to understand the wider organization and contribute to conversations outside of your specific technical expertise, influence people who are not reporting to you, and make decisions whose consequence or the consequence that reaches far beyond your immediate team. And the capabilities that got you to this point remain important, but they're no longer enough on their own to get you to the next step. And this transition is really what the program is designed to support. This move from being an expert or operational leader to becoming a much more strategic or enterprise level leader. What the program also does, and this is purely from a design perspective, it's not necessarily an academic model, but the program follows a leadership diamond. So we begin with really we begin with the individual, we begin with you, and we ask the question, why me? We then expand on this participant perspective about what am I influencing? What do I need to influence? Why does it matter to the organization? And then how do I turn it into action? And finally, closing the diamond, we bring it back to the individual by looking at now me. So who am I becoming as a leader? And what will I do differently? So although the program introduces many evidence-based thinking and practical leadership frameworks, it's not simply a collection of leadership topics. It's really a connected development journey from personal purpose to systems to stakeholders, strategic alignment, execution, and then ultimately then back to this involved leadership identity that we're trying to form. Following the orientation module, participants really move through 6 2-week online modules. And maybe just let me just pause there. The reason we've gone that route, so it's 6 modules, but spread over 2 weeks each. So to make the learning a bit more digestible for executives that are busy. So we're trying to get to a point where you spend 4 to 5 hours per week on each module. There's also a blended pathway. So where you have an online component, but the blended pathway then also includes an immersive 3-day on-campus experience. I'll touch on that a little bit later as well, but that then really focuses very much on the work you've done on the online program, the playbook you've developed. You would have worked with that, post that for about 3 months, and you then come to on campus, and we continue to work with that. But it's very much experiential. So it's about practice, it's about feedback, it's about connection and integration. So it's a very good add-on to the online content and taking it further to that next step. I think one of the most important things also is participants also get to bring real leadership challenges from your own organization onto the program. And that challenge becomes the practical thread running through the entire journey for you. So it is very much a personal journey and something practical to also work with. So the impact can be and should be very real. So with this in mind, I also just briefly want to touch on for who this is designed. I know I touched on it briefly already, but I think, as you'll see from the brochures also, if you've looked at that, or if you will look at it, people often ask whether the program is only for someone who already has a very senior title or manages large number of people. And I think the answer is simply no. I think the better test is not simply your title, but it's really looking at that transition you're making and the scope of influence that's now expected from you. So you may again be a newly appointed functional head, or have gone from managing your own work to managing managers, or contributing to much broader enterprise decisions. You could also find yourself that you may be leading a transformation or digital or data or AI or strategic project where many people now need you to mobilize, but not formally actually report to you. You may also be taking on responsibility for a new region, a new market, joining an executive committee or board for the first time, moving from deep technical expertise into a role where you need to engage with the strategy, people, culture, performance, and really integrating the whole. I also want to touch on something specific. You could also be a founder or an entrepreneur whose organization is scaling. What worked when you personally drove every decision may not longer work anymore. So you may now have more people, more stakeholders, more markets, more complexity to manage. So I think what all of these archetypes have in common is that you've already demonstrated capability in a very existing domain, but now the challenge is much broader, and it's asking much more or new capabilities from you. So you're actually asking yourself, how do I deliver within my area, to asking, how does my area contribute to the whole enterprise, and how do I influence this wider system? So I think there too, the program is therefore, I think, very practically relevant when your future success will depend less on the ability to provide answers yourself and more about the ability to frame the right questions, exercise judgment, build coalitions, align different parts of the organization, and of course, then deliver through others. So there too, participants should also be very willing to bring that genuine workplace challenge into the learning. This is not just a program where you remain at a safe distance from your own leadership reality. We want you to work on something that matters to you and, of course, matters to your organization. What we also find, and I think is important to also cover, is what will you actually gain from the program, and what commitment you are making. So again, I want to just briefly touch on this before we go into sort of questions, and I want to make it quite practical. I think because the value of the program is not simply that participants will learn a number of models, but by the end of the journey, really, if you join the program, you should be able to see more of the enterprise, make better decisions within that, and influence more effectively across the organization, the ecosystem you work, and really translate that strategic intent into credible action and ultimately impact. So the program begins with this leadership identity, the purpose, the presence, and then we consider what they want to know. So participants start considering what they want to know for what they want to be known for as leaders, what values guide them, and what may currently be limiting their confidence and your voice and your influence. We then look at developing a much stronger system perspective. So rather than treating complex problems as isolated events, we learn to examine these interdependencies, the stakeholders, the assumptions, the risk and potential unintended consequences of our decisions and actions. And this supports much more informed and more defensible decision making. And then from there, we then focus on influence, where we focus on, we learn how to build trust, how to understand formal and informal power, strengthening your networks and create this inclusive coalitions, because at enterprise level, very little meaningful change is actually delivered through formal authority alone. We touch on strategic alignment, where we really look at how to connect your purpose, your strategy, capabilities, culture, also governance and measurement, and ultimately execution. And we aim to become, or look at you to become better able to spot situations where everyone appears busy, but the activity is not necessarily taking the organization in the same direction. And then as we start closing and start bringing the diamond closer, we start looking into the change and execution again. So building that sponsorship, establishing a clear work streams, decision rights, creating an operating rhythm, using appropriate measures and designing experiments that allow leaders to learn and adapt rather than just simply push ahead with their fixed plan. And then finally, as we bring it together, we focus on, we look forward. So we look at some future forces. We look at AI, we look at sustainability, we look at the change of work or workforce change, and also just wider uncertainty and what that means for you in your leadership context and for the long-term value that you are actually responsible for and aiming to steward. Now, around this, these capabilities are then all captured in very practical outputs. So participants progressively develop over the 6 modules through the various assignments. You develop your leadership manifesto, you develop an enterprise map and a decision memo, also a stakeholder engagement and influence strategy, and also doing a strategic alignment audit, and ultimately then also a cross-functional execution and adaptive change plan. And all these are then brought together in the end for what we term your future fit leadership playbook pack, which includes an executive summary and sort of a board level presentation. Just on that, you also, as we do the assignments, they all build on each other. You do get feedback on that with us grading it and then giving you feedback that you can then incorporate into your learnings. So as we again, importantly, these modules don't stand disconnected from each other. They leave you with this coherent body of work around a real organizational priority and importantly, I think with a much clearer and more credible case for what you should do next. And I think this, I also just want to touch on sort of the learning rhythm, which is I sort of touched on, but I think it's important also to note, especially because we're busy professionals. So again, as I said, each module runs over 2 weeks. It's designed approximately for you to spend sort of 4 to 5 hours per week on that. And this is aimed to provide you with flexibility, but also with enough structure and accountability to keep you moving forward. And this rhythm stays consistent. So we also begin each module by making the content relevant. You introduce the leadership challenge behind each module, and then we move into diagnosing it and then showing it into your own context. And we also then engage with concise and actionable learning content, and this may include various forms, as Robert also mentioned earlier, short faculty videos, some reading, some cases, some interactive activities, and of course then personal reflection. And the intention, of course, is not to overwhelm you, but to really provide you with opportunity to work through this, but also have some flexibility on how you move through that. We also introduce a small number of sort of ideas you can also use, and there's also peer discussions and faculty input given throughout that, through live sessions, 1 live session per module, which is also a useful opportunity to not just engage with us or faculty, but also to engage with your fellow participants, in addition to the facilitated discussions on the platform taking place. And I think very important is this peer learning. The peer learning is very important. It's an opportunity for you to use the platform and use the live sessions to test your ideas, challenge your assumptions, and obviously test each other as well. A lot of the learning takes place among yourselves, and we obviously play a facilitating role within that. I think essentially the rhythm is about learning something, testing it in your own context, gathering evidence, and reflecting on what happened, and obviously then refine what actions you take post that. And I think also, as Rob mentioned, there are some knowledge tests, etc., that also come through, and again, because and then again the weekly assignments. But as I said, the weekly assignments build on each other. I also just want to briefly touch on the blended pathway. As I said at the end, if you choose the blended pathway, at the end of the online module when you get your leadership playbook. And you get to then work with that post the close of the online program. If you choose the blended pathway, you then have the immersion, the 3-day immersion on campus. But again, rather than arriving at Oxford to begin the work, you've already got a well-established challenge. You've got a body of analysis and proposed actions. And the 3 days that you're on campus then allows for you to work on that further, test that, look at, and we'll do this through simulations, we'll do this through presence of work, some strategic discussion, also discussions with your peers. And over the 3 days, most of it, there's a little bit of lecturing, but most of it is spent around interactive sessions around refining and developing some further ideas, and finding your leadership presence, etc. And of course, we do the normal Oxford things by also hosting a college dinner, and then doing some other fun activities also around that. But a very packed, full through 3 days. Great opportunity to also network, and engage with obviously fellow participants. And as we know from the online content, and then from or the online program, and then from the in-person, in both cases, a lot of great networking take place and relationships get built, and that in itself becomes an immense contributor going forward, from a networking perspective and a relationship perspective. So I think in that sense, if we look at this, really this program really combines that flexibility, with truly connected participation. So we hope it's designed to fit around very demanding professional roles, but not as passive learning. So participants need to engage, apply, experiment, and contribute to the learning, but also realizing that we're all busy executives, so there's a little bit of flexibility built into that because the way we stretch it. So hopefully what we're bringing is not simply about giving you knowledge about leadership, but it's about changing the lens through which you actually lead. So it's about moving beyond your own functions, seeing that wider system, exercising better judgment, influence across boundaries, connecting purpose with performance, and delivering that change responsibility. Also briefly, I should have done this at the beginning, but I'm the program director for this program. I've been involved with the school for the last 5 years, working on various programs covering strategy, leadership, and finance. And also now being involved with the design of this program. And then we've also got very seasoned academics and practitioners, through Mary, through Chris, and through Mahima, who is the academic leadership team involved with the program. And they will also, you'll get to know them also in the online content, but you will also get to spend time with each of them, and then a few other industry specialists, etc., during the in-person session on campus, if you choose the blended pathway. So I think hopefully that has covered what the program's about, who should attend, what the outcomes might be. And again, from my perspective, very happy to, I know we've got a few minutes left, so very happy to take a few questions. If there is any, I see there's one hand raised, but very happy to open questions or comments from the floor. I'm also just going to check. Okay, yeah, I can just see. Yeah, if there's any questions or comments that anybody wants to ask, please feel free, and we can address that. I see Vladimir was first, and then Vladimir, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself and ask your question. I'm just opening up I'm just going to open up the questions as well. I know there's a few answers that's been given here, but let me just quickly look at the one. How does the program impact the fintech CEO with a vision of global expansion? Well, hopefully I've addressed this. I think to your point, well, to your point is I think about that global perspective. Again, if you're going global, firstly, you've got to bring many followers with you from your own organization. You've got to also think about their development, but then going into that broader sphere about the stakeholders you need to engage with. And stakeholders obviously is a much broader ecosystem than just the traditional 4 or 5 stakeholders we think of. So I think from that perspective about that influence, how do we influence? How do we lead? How do we make decisions? I think it becomes an important point. And again, about that playbook. So I think no matter which industry you're in, I think the learnings remains very principle based, and because it's principle based, it's obviously transferable to various organizations, and then also various industries. Just also from, I see the one question there, and I did touch on it briefly, but how long has this program been running? It's a brand new program. So we're launching this. The first iteration is going to take place now in September. We've spent about the last year and a half developing it. Obviously, it brings together some content and research from various Oxford practitioners, but particularly also the work that Mary and Chris and Mahima has done, and pulling off their expertise and their research, and including many others. But this will be the first iteration and the first cohort. We're bringing this forward as one of the new flagship programs for the school. At the moment, it'll run twice a year with I think a few more planned. Then also just from the live sessions, there's one live session per module. The live session sometimes is referred to as a tutorial, but it's really there to unpack some of the practical, to have a real-time virtual interaction. I also want to mention that we do have per module also various discussion forums, which is run on a particular platform, which is also very engaging, and that's where participants and ourselves get to engage. But it is great on a per module basis to also get together for the live session to address any questions, also for you to engage with myself, the tutors, and also with faculty. There's six live sessions, and faculty, Mary or Mahima or Chris joins 2 of those. The rest I then manage with the tutors, and again we use that for we use that for your questions, but also putting questions to the group. So there's some case studies we'll look at, and again it becomes a very interactive environment. Oh, I think very important there. I see it's a nominous attendee, but I think a question there that came up was, how does the program help public sector leaders who really rely on more heavily on soft power to lead, especially where lines of responsibility is blurred? I think a very good point. And I mean, we spend a significant amount of time on influence. And then also specifically on breaking that down into how do we actually lead, and we actually look specifically at power and the various forms of that. And I think a big part of the learning is exactly what you've articulated, is that we in most cases, we don't have direct authority over the people we lead in our organization and even outside our organization. And how do we then do that? So we spend a lot of time in going through that, and in how we explore that and how you build a plan around that to not just manage yourself, but also then take forward in managing others around you, and your team in navigating that. And of course, there's various forms of that. So we also look at different leadership styles, when to use that. We look at the power of doubt, and how to enable that. So we look at imposter syndrome, often felt by ourselves or by people working for us, and how do we then best navigate that. But also what we'll see in the program is how that can actually be used as a power to actually drive us forward, and not be treated as something negative, which also is an interesting thing to look at. Yeah, I think an interesting comment there also from Fota. I think about is it completely online? Yes, we have an online platform where, as you saw earlier, where content is shared. We've got certain pre-recorded videos. We share case studies, and there's a each program or each module opens, and you get to work through that over the period. We do have live interaction, though. There's a separate platform that we also launched that you're part of. Think of it like this format almost. We use Pronto, but think of it like Slack or even a WhatsApp group where there's a question posed and we have various discussions. You can pose questions that we can answer or facilitate. We set a weekly question or a few questions that we then debate. So that becomes the classroom. Although it's online, you work through it at your own pace over those 2 weeks. There is questions that we do pose that the cohort can still discuss and tease ideas out from each other. But I do think it's also important that although it's online, it is still very interactive. And of course, we've got the live session as well. And then, as I said, it culminates, and those who choose the blended section can also then come to campus to build further on that. Yes, there are group assignments. I say group assignments. It's all individual assignments. We don't have a group assignment. So you come with your particular problem or case, which you might develop as we move forward. But there is a weekly, there is a per module assignment due. But from that perspective, you like I said, it builds on each other, but there's no group work required from that perspective. What we also do, as I said, we'll grade your assignment and give you personalized feedback for you to incorporate, or then to also just push yourself further as you take this back to your offices. I think what is important, what we also tend to do, is we use the live sessions also to give feedback. We see some great insight from across the cohort. So on a weekly basis from an assignment, we give you your personal feedback, but then we also share either through a video or in the live sessions, share some learnings and potentially shortcomings we saw in the cohort assignments in general. So you do get that interaction, but each is treated as separate. I'm just looking at some others. Yeah, I think there's a few questions here about this is executive education. So again, I think there's a question here about, will this program help for PhD program or more targeted for practical situations? This doesn't form part of sort of a PhD or a master's journey. It's very much executive education. But of course, from that perspective, not just this program, but all the offerings that the school has, in many cases, does build on each other, but it is very much executive education, not academic side. But there's obviously a journey that can be created or can looked at, and I'm sure if you contact us, we'll be able to get back to you and think what might be suitable if you are pursuing something different or where this could latch on. I also want to just make a see. There's another comment there. How does the emerging leader program differentiate itself from other executive education institutions? Has there been any spillover from traditional into the teaching philosophy? Well, I think firstly, let me answer that just by saying that, of course, this program incorporates a lot of academic study around leadership, around strategy, around leadership. Well, sorry, obviously around leadership, but a lot of frameworks and the latest research that not just the professors and myself are involved with, but also from the broader school. And then from some other outside sources as well, to develop the program to make sure that it's up to date and relevant, given that it still remains principal focus. So from that side, there is a inclusion of that. It's really also about looking at what capabilities are we trying to build, and that's how we've designed the program. And it's very important, I think, I briefly touched on the artifacts you will be creating. It's very much focused on the impact you will have and what capabilities you will leave the program with, and what you can then actually go do with that. So from that perspective, very practical from an impact perspective or application point of view. I think for me personally, what sets not just this program apart, but I think what sets the program apart, or potentially this program apart from various other programs, is I think one, the faculty, and also the content we've created and the various inputs we've received from practitioners also delivering on it. That insight is important. I think two, the fact that it's online, but the fact that it's also interactive, and there's the live sessions, and you get to engage in real time. Not all online programs do work like that, so I think the fact that it's in my terms virtual live, I think is something that's unique. And then of course creating that safe space where we can all share, and creating the community around the participants being able to engage and share with each other and also learn from each other becomes very important. And then what is unique, I think, is the fact that you can couple this to the in-person portion as well, by actually coming to campus and working with it further, which is also, I think, a differentiator. And then maybe a third point, although this program is available kind of for anybody to personally join. And of course, I'm sure many of you might be company sponsored, but this program is also designed, and you can contact us on that too, suitable for company delivery. So there's options to potentially customize, there's options to have closed cohorts. So this is very much, as it's one of the flagship programs in the leadership stable, it's very much geared towards individual participants joining from a diverse cohort. I want to say normally we get about at least 10 to 15 countries represented. So again, a very diverse cohort, very diverse experience, so a great learning environment. But I think it is important to note that is also aligned to, we can do specific work for companies as well, a part of their learning journey. So there's a lot of customization that can happen. And then maybe just the final one there, is there a leader you can think of, or one of the alumni who has been successful in the culture sector after taking this course? I, I can't particularly think of culture, but what I can say, and I know we had Rob earlier also speak, what I can just say on the 4 or 5 other programs that I've worked on, we've seen some great success where participants come onto a program with a particular intention, and they leave the program being enlightened to a big degree, because there are certain things that you discover about yourself and about others, which I think is not quantifiable necessarily, but such a significant transformation that can take place. I think also in this program, because there's a hard artifact you walk away with, you have a plan to implement, and we also have follow-ups. There's a follow-up 30 and 90 days post to keep you accountable, and we get feedback from that from you to see what has actually happened. But we've seen in other programs some great work where participants has taken their plans as the base and had some great success implementing that. Of course, if you are interested in the program, there's ways of reaching out to us, and we'll see when we come back to the main room shortly. We will also see how you can how you can how you can apply, but also how you can ask additional questions if you want to engage with one of the advisors. And we can also share some further detail on some successes we've seen. But there's one participant, and there's a few videos out on him that he was already a director of one of the businesses, but took the proposal around this was sustainability, and put a ESG strategy in place for his team. Ultimately, that got noticed and got him promoted, and now he's got a global role. Now, I know it's a very short example, but we have examples of that where significant impact has actually been made. But of course, it's all about the application. We can give you the tools, but it's up to you to put that into action. Hopefully, we do give you very practical tools. And I think very importantly, it's also about that network. I think it's important from the network perspective that the participants you have on the cohort with you over that 6-module period over that time, you can and you should create a very strong relationship with all of them, and ultimately you've got the safe environment to interact, and learn from each other, challenge each other, and be sounding boards for each other. It's something we as faculty and facilitators also help with. But I think post the program that becomes so important. So if you complete this program successfully, you become part of the alumni community. As we saw at the beginning, it's already 67,000 strong and growing. It's a great platform to be close to the school, stay on top of latest thought leadership. But from a program perspective, you've also got the participants you attended to online, and of course those that attend in person, the blended session, get to probably build even closer relationships. Those are friendships and relationships that can last for a lifetime, from a personal and professional perspective. And those relationships, I find, even the relationships we continue with past participants, become so valuable as it grows. We do see participants come back in different forms, do other programs, sometimes come back and contribute to our programs from an experience and practical perspective, but then also how they collaborate post. Many times informally, how they collaborate, but you can remain sounding boards for each other. We know leadership is often a very personal thing. It's also a very lonely world, like entrepreneurship, and we don't often have the safe space where these conversations can happen. So one thing we have seen from delivering these type of programs is that environment does create a space where those relationships can form. Again, that's not our role to create that, but that's what naturally comes if you show up in the right way, and we create the environment where you can share. So for me, not just this program, but I think almost any of the Said Business School programs becomes a very, very powerful thing to do from a personal development perspective, and learning, and and learning perspective, almost no matter where you are in your career. I think this program has a particular key role to play, and you'll see also if you look at some of the other programs, it is well placed within the learning journey. So really puts you at that, and again, as I said, at that transition of becoming a enterprise leader, looking at a much broader role. And then it obviously leads very nicely into there's two or three, there's one or two other programs that's aimed at even more senior leaders, where, for example, if you become a partner of a law firm or accounting firm, this is probably well suited to that, or then becoming a senior partner, and then beyond that, you might have your managing partners. So again, this program fits nicely into that, but also aligns then with a learning journey, which you can also craft for yourself or for your organization. But that's also something we can obviously individually pick up with you, especially when you want to look at how do you curate this potentially with other programs within your organization. A comment I can also make is I've been talking a lot. I know there's questions that came through, so thank you for that. But I think a live session is something like this, but not me talking so much. It is much more interactive, because in those sessions you can unmute yourself. We're all on camera and we get to talk and debate. But it's been great spending the last couple of minutes with you. I think we're coming back to the main room. Or the others will join us shortly from their breakouts. But from my perspective, again, great to have shared some more information about the program with you. It's been sort of a passion project, I guess, for the last year and a half, working on this with the other academic directors as well. Looking forward to the first iteration in September, and hopefully I've answered many of the questions. If there are any other questions still pending, you can please reach out to the school, and we can obviously address that with you. And you'll see later, I'll mention it now too, but there is a discount code also coming, because we are marketing a few of our programs. You'll also see when I'll share the slides just now, there is a discount code that also applies. Thank you for your time, and happy to take any further questions if there is anything. But I think, if I'm right, I'm just checking with Bex. I think we're probably close to everybody coming back to the main room. Yeah, I see we'll get the rest back into the main room, I think, in the next couple of seconds. I want to say thanks, Mansoor. Appreciate your comment. It's very difficult talking to myself, not being able to interact more live with any of you. But yeah, like I said, hopefully this won't be. Hopefully this is not the last time we chat. Thank you for that.
I think we're back in the main. Good stuff. So I think any final questions in these last couple of minutes, and indeed, just to reiterate that there's a 15% off code that we're running at the moment. Find your edge. We've shared that on previous slides. We can reshare the link for enrollment on these various courses that we've been discussing, as well as the link for a consultation call should you have any further questions. We'll put the link in the chat just before we finish. Were there any further questions across any of the courses before we finish in these last couple of minutes that we have?
Alex, sorry, I just noted Callum from our coach just asked when is the latest to enroll for the MFU in September that you mentioned?
It's looking like a popular course. So it's running on 30th of September. It's looking very popular. As I said, I would say in order not to lose out, and people think, why would you lose out on an online course? It's not a physical room, but there is a set limit to how many we can take. I would say don't leave it any later than the sort of week of the 14th of September to enroll into that course, so as not to lose out. I think that's a safe approach. Otherwise, we're looking at January. Any other final thoughts, questions? Just adding the codes in the chat there, as you can see them popping up for consultation calls, discount code to apply, find your edge, 50% off. Well, we're running short on time, so that just really leaves me to say thank you all for joining. Thank you to our panel for joining today and for giving us their time and expertise. Really interesting as ever to hear from them. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you over the next couple of months. As I say, when these courses start. But any further questions, do let us know. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have. No, thank you all for today, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Goodbye.